Backrooms is one of the most hyped up movies of the entire year, and if you know almost nothing about it, you are in the same position I was about 24 hours ago. Even my dad, who I talked to on the phone this morning, he was like, what is this Backrooms movie that people are talking about? So before I review the actual movie, let's talk about the very basics of the Backrooms, coming from somebody that has not poured hundreds of hours into the lore of this entire universe. And since we're talking to people like my dad for a second, let's go to the very basics here. So the Backrooms is known as a creepypasta. A creepypasta is pretty much a group of people online that create an urban legend of some sort. It usually starts with a picture or a drawing of something, and people, whether it be in online forums or wikis, they'll just write a lot and they'll add more and more to the lore of what this thing is, and it just goes deeper and deeper down a rabbit hole of all these cool writers making a cool horror story. And some of these creepypastas get so big that they become even bigger in pop culture. Like Slender Man is the most popular example of what a creepypasta can be. And I am not somebody that ever got into that side of the internet because as a teenager, I liked to be able to sleep at night. I didn't like horror movies in my early teenage years, you know, like I was super scared of all that kind of stuff. So I didn't even think about touching this corner of the internet. And the Backrooms started with this picture and description that was anonymously posted on 4chan back in 2019, which started its own fan base of people that added onto the lore of that version of the Backrooms. Because in January of 2022, a 16-year-old named Kane Parsons uploaded a short film called The Backrooms to his YouTube channel. At the time of recording this video, I think it has like almost 80 million views. It's truly insane. And after he posted that short film, he just went on this spree. He decided to make more and more short films, turned it into pretty much a web series of other videos exploring what his version of the Backrooms could be. He's made his own lore, his own Easter eggs, all that kind of stuff. If you're into that kind of rabbit hole storytelling, this guy has made a huge living off of it. And the guy can't even have a legal alcoholic drink in America because now he is 20 years old. He is making a Backrooms movie that is backed by A24, James Wan with his company Atomic Monster, Osgood Perkins, Sean Levy. And it's just like a really cool classic Hollywood story that somebody this young is getting an opportunity like this. And the only Backrooms content I have seen was that original short film that got uploaded 4 years ago. But I kind of left it at that. I didn't want to go super deep into the lore before watching this movie because I like to go into movies as blind as humanly possible and just experience the movie for what it is. Like, does the movie stand on its own? Does it feel like you need to see other things to understand the movie? And I feel like to be as unbiased as possible, I kind of have to go into the movie without watching all the other YouTube videos. So I saw the movie, I watched a little bit more of Backrooms related content. I watched a lot of Kane Parsons interviews, which just a side note, awesome guy. Obviously, I don't know him in person. Maybe he's a dick, but I don't get that vibe from the interviews I've seen from him. Like, he's clearly the type of person that is inarguably the smartest person in the room. And a lot of those people tend to come off pretentious, I think. This Kane kid is the complete opposite of that. He just seems like the most down-to-earth, chill, smart guy ever. Like, I feel like I could sit on the couch with him, and even though he's way smarter than me, we could just talk movies for like 4 or 5 hours. And the fact that he is 20 years old, it's borderline ridiculous. I feel like he's an industry plant to a degree. You know, I watched the Michael Jackson movie recently and they tell him to lie about your age. It feels almost like, man, are you 28? But either way, it's an awesome story. And I like to talk about the movie itself without talking about the story around the movie, but sometimes it's just impossible. Like, if you knew about all the Michael Jackson drama behind the making of that movie, it's impossible to talk about the movie without talking about that. And this is a very different situation, but I think while I'm watching it, there is just an intangible thing in your brain of being like, man, I can't believe a 20-year-old made this. Like, there's something truly impressive about that, because when I was 20 years old, I wanted to make movies too, but I was shotgunning bush lights in the Theta Chi basement. And maybe that kind of research will pay off in a movie for me one day. But when it comes to the Backrooms, after sitting on it for almost 24 hours at this point, I think this is a very solid movie. In some cases, I think it's a pretty incredible movie, because there was a point in the movie where I literally said, what the fuck, out loud, just verbally, because that'll happen occasionally and my girlfriend will look at me like, what the hell are you doing right now? It takes a lot for a movie to get that verbal expression out of me. The only other time I could think that happened in recent memory was Weapons, and before that it was Barbarian. And I do like those two movies more than the Backrooms, if I'm gonna be honest, but the fact that this movie could still get that out of me, I think says a lot about the filmmaking. But then there are just a few things that the movie is so close to getting to the next level, like a stupid amount of close, to the point where it's like one small thing goes better, and this is a great movie, I think. And the more I wrote about this movie and the more I thought about it, the more I do like it. Like, I really like this movie, and I can't wait to talk about it. And maybe I'm a week away from calling it great once I watch the entire web series and I go on an 8-hour binge of Reddit threads. But right now, this is my first reaction of somebody that has not dove into the Backrooms lore. So let's talk about the best part of the Backrooms movie, and that's the Backrooms. Even from watching the short film, it was pretty obvious that Kane had a very clear vision of three things: production design, visual effects, and the suspense of horror filmmaking. But all three of those things, I think, get elevated with the budget he is given here. Because I know before, a lot of the Backrooms, he was just pretty much making in Blender, like it was all animated. So to have full-on sets in this movie, I mean, it looks pretty incredible. And it's just as creepy and mysterious as it is when you would watch it in a YouTube video. And I think the thing that works about both the Backrooms movie and the short film and the entire web series is that it just completely understands horror to the most minute detail. Because the entire basic premise of horror filmmaking has always been, what is the scary thing on the other side? That's what the entire genre is built on. It's like, man, don't open that door right there because you know something bad is gonna happen. Don't go down that creepy hallway because you know the killer is gonna be on the end of it. That is what the Backrooms is. Like, it's literally just going down hallways and knowing that something bad is probably gonna happen. It is the most literal version of the horror cliche. And I think a lot of people might find this kind of horror filmmaking a bit slower. There are definitely like 3-minute chunks where people are walking through hallways and nothing is really happening. But I think Kane is so good at making you like hold your breath because you keep thinking like, well, what if something happens right now? That feeling of unease is there throughout the entire movie. And I know it might sound weird complimenting that kind of technique in a horror film because you're like, well, every horror movie should do that. But the fact is they don't. There's a lot of people that aren't 20 years old. They're 45 and they can't make a good horror movie. And I think his style gets elevated even more when you're watching it on a big screen with an awesome theater sound system versus watching it at home with no headphones. There's definitely a difference. And I think he has proven that this is worthy of being something that doesn't have to necessarily be on the internet, and it could be something more. And I think what's cool about those tracking shots and when you turn the corner, there's always that sense of randomness where you don't know what the next thing you're looking at is going to be. And even though nothing in this movie necessarily ever got me super scared or terrified, I was uneasy the entire time while watching it because that what if of what could be on the other side is done just so well here. I have to give credit where it's due. And even in the cliched sequences, like there's a few times in this movie where somebody is about to do something and the way they set up a sequence, you're just looking at it like, I know exactly what's going to happen. And that exact thing does end up happening. But then there's always just like one more thing added to it that makes it interesting. I'm like, oh, I didn't see that happening. And that extra thing might make me laugh. It might make me feel a bit more uneasy. And those are the things I look for when watching a horror movie. You know, this movie's getting compared a lot to Obsession, mainly because these are two YouTubers making horror movies. But I think even more so, one thing I liked about Obsession, which I will talk about soon, I saw it 9 months ago and I still couldn't get a video out on time. But instead of blaming myself, I'm going to blame my friend that got married that weekend. So come on, Chris, why do you have to be so selfish? Why do you have to get married the weekend Obsession came out, man? I do think Obsession has a lot of cliches. It has a lot of scares where you clearly see it coming, but then Curry Barker adds one more thing to it where I'm like, oh man, I didn't think that was gonna happen. That was really cool. I want to see things I haven't seen before. And another thing that I think is so cool about Backrooms is it's so clear that Kane has a vision for really distinct horror imagery. This guy just knows how to design something that looks fucked up. Shit like that puts a smile on my face in a horror movie, and I think Kane deserves a lot of credit here because even though he didn't take that original picture on 4chan that went viral, so you could argue that like, oh, he wasn't super creative because he just took that image and turned it into something else. I disagree with that statement. But even if that was your criticism of this movie and Kane as a filmmaker, I think there's no argument that these entities that he comes up with are really interesting. And they have like this way of looking off that if like the movie, it feels familiar but so distinct at the same time. And I really like that a lot. It shows that he has a lot of promise as not only like a horror filmmaker, but I think this guy can make like an awesome sci-fi movie. So if it isn't clear enough, anything involving the Backrooms themselves, I absolutely love. Those are by far the best sequences of the entire movie. It's some of the most exhilarating stuff I've seen in the theater all year. And I think a lot of those sequences are enhanced by the score. It's not overly used here, but when it really just shows itself off in a couple sequences, it immediately stands out of like, holy shit, this is awesome. So yeah, anything involving those sequences, 10 out of 10, have no notes. They were awesome. But like I said, it just feels like this movie is one step away from being great, to the point that I do think a Backrooms movie works. And I think this one is so close to nailing the formula of what could work for a Backrooms movie. I just don't feel like this film delivers enough for it to feel like its own fully standalone thing. I think it's very close, and I think it's very clear that Kane understands every single detail that is in this movie serves its own purpose. As somebody that's not fully into the Backrooms lore, I'm sure there's a couple things in here that I don't fully understand. I know that he knows about every single detail in this movie. Other filmmakers, I question that, and in times you get proven right that a lot of filmmakers are kind of just winging it. They don't think about every single thing. Kane is not one of those people, and I appreciate that. It's one of the things I love about Ari Aster and pretty much all of his films, where even if you watch Hereditary or Midsommar 4 or 5 times, there are things in that movie you will have not picked up on. I guarantee it. And I love shit like that. Like, when someone cares, when there's passion, I care. And I feel like if I did watch this movie again and watched more Backroom stuff before that rewatch, I could probably counter my own argument here. Like, this is one of those movies I do see myself enjoying more the more I watch it. But at the time of recording this review, just on a first watch of somebody that's not super into the Backrooms, as someone that's coming from a perspective of somebody that just loves movies and doesn't necessarily just follow specific lore type videos on YouTube, I feel like a casual person is gonna be left wanting more, but not in like a satisfying kind of way. And I think there are a couple examples of this, right? Like, first of all, you have 2 incredible actors here. You have Chiwetel Ejiofor and you have Renat Reinsve. One of them is playing a furniture store owner and the other is playing his therapist. And I do think Kane gets good performances out of them. I think one of the interviews I saw of him was talking about how his biggest problem with doing this movie was taking pretty much like a non-verbal concept and turning it into a verbal medium, where for a movie you need a lot more people to talk. Not that the Backrooms never had any sort of dialogue, but it was very minimal compared to something like this. But I think the dialogue is decent. I don't think that's necessarily the problem. The problem for me was I just didn't really care about anything going on that wasn't during the Backrooms segments. And besides the very opening of the film, it takes a while before we get back there. Like, I didn't have my watch on me, but if I had to guess, it's somewhere between 30 and 40 minutes before the real meat of the Backrooms story starts sinking in. But the flip side of that is, even though I wasn't super into those first 40 minutes and there were a few scenes where I'm like, man, do we really need this? I don't really like this. By the end of the film, there is payoff to everything in the beginning, which I do appreciate. And that is one of the reasons I think if I rewatch this movie, I would like it even more. But even though there is payoff from those scenes, I still think the first 40 minutes are just kind of tedious. I don't think they're paced very well. It just kind of felt like Kane was obligated to make those sequences so he could get to the things he really wanted to make. He really wanted to make all these backroom sequences that are awesome, but he had to give some background to make it a more standalone experience. And I know that was kind of a requirement while making a movie like this. I just feel like those scenes tamper my entire experience with the movie. But again, maybe if I did more lore research on the Backrooms, my opinion on that would change. But I do think that is the biggest obstacle the Backrooms movie is going to have, because I think a lot of casual audience members that just want to go to the movies and have a good horror movie, I think a lot of them are going to walk out not liking this movie. Like I mentioned, this movie's been compared to Obsession mainly only because they're made by YouTubers and they're horror movies. But Obsession is like a way more relatable, mainstream feeling kind of horror movie. And this is like, what if David Lynch was a YouTuber that would binge Five Nights at Freddy's lore videos at night? And the whole point of the Backrooms is it purposely avoids a lot of information. It's not going to give you a lot of answers going into this movie. It ends very abruptly. Even though I fucking love the last shot of this movie, even I was like, wait, there's not like 20 more minutes. It felt like we needed one more sequence to kind of cap out the climax of the movie. And it just leaves me feeling a little empty by the end of it, even though I'd loved so much of the buildup up to that point. And I do like what the ending is. I just think it's going to be a very frustrating movie for a lot of people. And you can already see it on Letterboxd. A lot of people are like, yeah, I appreciate this, but it is not for me. My girlfriend being one of them, she walked out. She was like, yeah, good for everybody else that really likes that. And I don't do this anymore because I have a very addictive personality. But trust me, I can go down a lore rabbit hole all day. I grew grew up on the Call of Duty zombie storyline, okay? The FromSoft games are my favorites of all time. I have sat through 3-hour Dark Souls story explain videos. I love this kind of shit when I have the time for it, but a lot of people don't like that kind of stuff and they don't have the time for it. And I've always been big on, I don't think homework should be a requirement to enjoy a movie for what it is, especially if it's trying to be its own standalone thing. And I think Backrooms almost does that. It does it like 70 to 75% of the way. I think it gives you enough of a base if you are not familiar with any of the online stories to just go in, understand a little bit, and get a good horror movie out of it, but I definitely don't think it ties it all up in a nice bow by the end of it. And I think a good example for this, like my favorite movie of the year right now is Nirvana the Band, The Show, the movie. I absolutely love that movie. It's awesome. It's a great comedy, but that movie is like pretty much a sequel to a show that was canceled that almost nobody was able to watch. So I never really watched the show before watching the movie. I'd only seen a couple clips online, but it feels like its own standalone thing that you could only watch that movie and get full satisfaction out of. It feels like 100% its own thing, which would obviously be enhanced if you watched the show prior, but you could take anybody to that movie and they would understand what's going on. I don't think that's the case with this movie, but I did love a lot of it, and I could see myself just being higher on it down the line. So that being said, my first rating for the Backrooms movie, I'm gonna start doing this with my ratings because I feel like when you put a rating in a YouTube video, it feels too cemented and you have to stand by that opinion forever, and I don't really believe in that. I change my Letterboxd ratings all the time by like a half star, and at this moment, the Backrooms is a 6 out of 10 for me. I don't round up, so let me just say that this is probably like a 6.8 or a 6.9, and someone would argue, why not just give it a 7? And to me, 7 is the bar of like, this is a really good movie, and Backrooms is a good movie that is the closest it could be to being a really good movie. There's just too many things I think hold it back right now, but the more I think about it, the more I've sat with it, the more I watch videos of people explaining what the Backrooms is, I do like enjoy it more, and I enjoyed my experience watching it. All those sequences in the Backrooms are awesome, and to be honest, I think when we look back on Kane's career 50 years from now, like obviously the Backrooms is going to be a huge part of it, but I think the movie itself won't be one of his highest crowning achievements. You know, I think this will be something where it's like, oh yeah, he was early in his career, he was figuring out his style, he's figuring out how to tell a story, and then like 10 years from now we're getting something that's incredible from him. Like what the hell, if this is what you make at 20 years old, what does a 55-year-old Kane Parsons make? I don't know the answer to that, and I can't wait to find out. I think his future looks bright, and hopefully my future looks bright too. This is Chase. I talk about movies on the internet, so eventually I can make movies of my own, and if you like and agree with my opinions, or you just appreciate my opinions, I try to be as honest as possible on here. Be sure to subscribe, because not only are you a cool person, but that also means I'll hopefully make one of your favorite movies one day. And I hope you have an awesome day. Thanks.